Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Veteran Series by Fantasy Football Hub. So in the previous videos in this series, we met Andy Green. We learned about his superb fantasy football record and history and how he managed to finish third overall in FPL last season. If you missed it, the links are in the description below. In this video, we are going to ask Andy for his fantasy football tips. Okay, so firstly, Andy, what is the best piece of fantasy football advice you have ever received?
I think the best piece of advice or really kind of comment about the game that's kind of helped me survive, certainly the last season, if not a few seasons ago, is the points that your player scores or the points that your team scores. It's not about the outcome, like what actually happened. It's more about, did you make the right decision? This season was a prime example for, looking at Tam Abraham. I captained him twice, and the one that always stands out is the Brighton game, where I didn't watch the game, logged onto the OptaStats tool on the hub the next day, and I could not believe he had not returned. I mean, I think it was 5 shots on target, 2-3 big chances, XG of 1.57. I always remember these stats. Unbelievable, and that for me was a terrible outcome, and many other players captained as well. But it was the right decision. It was the right decision because Brighton were very leaky. Chelsea were performing pretty well. He was performing pretty well, and his XG was, he should have scored 1.5 goals plus probably an assist as well. So again, I'll go back to it, and I did write an article for the Hub about hindsight, bias or kicking yourself about moves you should have made or the captaincy you should have made. And last season, I had Manny vice captain 3 or 4 times, and I went back and looked at my first kind of 15 game weeks. And actually, only twice was it the wrong decision. I think once I'd captained Sterling after some terrible performances, and it should have been on Manny. But really, this season didn't really kind of, wasn't firing on all cylinders for me. But as long as you're making the right decision, don't kick yourself if it doesn't work, because it's about the decision and not the outcome.
So I think that's such absolutely brilliant advice, because it's so easy to, kind of look, as you just said, exactly, look in hindsight and said, oh, well, no, that was obvious. But I always now try and reflect on my feelings half an hour before the deadline. You really, you set your captain, you're second guessing it, but no, all the stars are aligned. He is the best pick. And I think if you can rewind a little bit and just get back into that mindset of why you did it, it's not great to see a huge fall in rank. It's not great when you see other people captaining players who have scored braces or hat-tricks and stuff. But I do think last season, the one just gone kind of 19 and 20 was a bit of an odd season. You see a lot of very good managers, obviously yourself included in that, who didn't have as good as seasons, as previously. But actually, Will, the founder of the Hub, made a really good point on the podcast a few weeks ago around, but are we going to use one season's lot of data now to say how we're going to play going forward? Are we going to look at the previous kind of 8 or 9 seasons and say, well, actually, this was the right way to play, and the stats and the performances of these players kind of back that up? So I think that's a brilliant point in terms of, as long as you've made the right decision. I mean, what would be worse, right, than making the wrong decision and getting it wrong? Then you'd be kicking yourself, wouldn't you? Right. So
yeah, I see a lot of players talking about, oh, if only I'd captained that player. But if you liken it to a poker analogy, it's kind of like having, 6-8 suited and a pre-raise flop and you fold. And then, of course, it flops like a straight or a flush, and you're thinking, oh, what if I just called that one? But if you just called that one all the way through the game, you'd be antied out.
Exactly that. No, I think that's a brilliant piece of advice there, Andy. So what is the biggest mistake that you see fantasy football managers make?
I think the biggest mistake I see people make is taking hits too frequently. Not just for kind of new players in the game or post a transfer window, but if you've got a player that gets injured and he's not really a key player and you've got a decent bench player, people just take hits to get rid of that player before he drops 0.1 million in price. And I know some people are aiming for the 110 million bank balance, But I just think taking those hits, of course, it's great when it works out, and you'll see it all over Twitter. Oh, I just took a hit to, bring in XYZ player, and he's just scored 2 goals for me. Of course, it's great, and you always shout
Yeah.
about it when it works out. But if you continuously take hits throughout the season for that sort of strategy, I think you're going to end up on the losing side overall.
I'd agree with that. If you look at if you look at your front 7 every week, if you think on average how many of them return, probably, I don't know, maybe I'd guess around 2. Whereas when you're taking a hit, you're banking on that player, that kind of attacking player, which it normally is, scoring in that game week, which is like a 2 in 7 chance-ish, roughly, just using that kind of analogy. And I completely agree. It looks great when you see on Twitter that someone's brought something for a hit and they've banged. They don't post on Twitter the ones that haven't worked. And I think, again, I think that's a really good piece of advice there, Andy, is that. What is your biggest tip for fantasy football managers?
Well, other than don't take too many hits. No, we've been through that before. I'd say that for those who don't, and I know there's a lot of players who just kind of go on eye test alone or gut feel alone, but I really think you should be looking at some form of stats tools. The Hub one is great. I use that almost every day, because the amount of information's out there now that I think it'd be silly not to, basis a lot of other players are playing. You're at a disadvantage if you're not using it. Now, by all means, don't utilize a lot of the data that's on there, but you can't, unless you're in this fortunate position that you can watch every single minute of every single game and rewind and watch the key moments and look at every single player throughout, which is almost impossible because the camera's not on them. But if you can do that, then you're very fortunate. You don't have to. But I would say that you really should be looking at some form of stats, whether it's very simple kind of shots on target or key chances, or you look at something like XG or expected points or XGC for teams defensively. I just think there's no harm in doing it, and it can improve your FPL game in many ways.
I think as well, I don't think it's a coincidence either that the game is now getting harder as well, which is aligned with so much information like stats now being available as well. I think that a lot more people are using the stats and are using the content on the hub, in other places, and it's improving their game, and it's making it more difficult for the people in the past who would have kept all this information in their back pocket and just kind of used it on their team. It's now out there, right? And the hubs tools, all our, everyone who's doing these videos, all use them. All our members use them, and we, a lot of managers have real, success. And I don't think it's a coincidence now that we're seeing it. It's harder for seasoned players, more experienced players who are used to getting really good ranks, finding it harder now because it's bringing everyone else up. So again, Andy, a really, really, really good tip there as well. And leading on from that, I suppose the final question: what is your favourite fantasy football tool? I can guess.
Well, I guess we just mentioned it. No, I think it is really the first, when I log onto the site, it's the first thing I go to. I go to it after my players have played. It's usually available within a few hours, and can monitor my own team, but also my targets. And then also, ahead of transfers and wildcards, I use it quite in depth, looking at, you can remove the home games, add the away games. You can look at team stats, player stats. You can look at expected points, which is actually quite useful because you can see players that are really underperforming or overperforming what their stats say. Now, obviously, if you use it religiously, and this is why I say don't use these stats tools 100%. Don't make all your decisions and your team strategy around them, because you will miss out on gems like Vardy this year, for example. He started off, I remember doing the podcast with you guys, he started off, literally scoring every game with some terrible, terrible stats. I'm the first one to hold my hand up and say, look, that one got away from me. I didn't watch enough Leicester, probably because of my 2-year-old son, who was 1 then. But he certainly defied the stats. However, if you look at towards the midpoint of the season, he actually it converged. So he was way outperforming his stats, and then his stats started to improve. You know, the number of shots on goal, the quality of the shots. So then I brought him in, and he did very well for me. So you know, it's one of these things that it's always a balance, right? You know, you've got to make sure that you're not using anything. You know, take as many inputs as you can, but that should definitely be one. So yeah, the OptiStats tool is very flexible. It's got pretty much everything you need on there to analyze. The one thing to watch out for though is the promoted players, obviously, because they won't have that Opta data on the tools. So that's something to be looking through. You know, from the championship data.
And from next season, it will be available on the Fantasy Football Hub app as well, because we'll be releasing the app in time for the 2021 season as well. So you'll be able to use that tool on the go, Andy. So you can wake up.
See, that's just going to make me more addicted to not only my phone, but also the Opta tool, right? Because now I'm going to be able to use it on the bus, on the train, on the car, everything. Oh,
you'll be like, wake up, FPL team OptiStats, phone the wife.
It's the worst thing that can happen, I think. Being no, seriously, the app is very. I've seen the first edition of the app, and it's very slick. And to have that amount of data available in an app is going to be superb.
It is. You're right. Okay, so just to wrap up, Andy, quick fire round. Only 4 questions. Form or fixtures?
Oh, tough one. That I would say form now. It used to be fixtures.
Okay. Is build-in team value important? Yes or no?
No.
Is there such a thing as an essential player?
No.
And stats or eye test? I think I know the answer to this one.
Stats for me.
Stats. Okay, cool. It's very interesting on that last one, the stats or eye test. We've had a real mix. It's been really good, which just obviously proves that, you know, there is no one way to play the game. So that's good. So thank you so much, Andy, for sharing your story with us. Congratulations again. I know personally you're sick to death of talking about your 3rd place finish and all the congratulations that go with it, but it's an absolutely superb achievement, and one which only, you know, a few people in the world will ever have. You know, there's only a certain amount of you know, spots available for it, but many congratulations, and thanks for sharing, you know, your story and all the insights. You know, it's great to meet you a bit more as a person for all our watchers and listeners as well. So where can we find you, Andy, if anyone wants to get hold of you for any reason?
Currently on Twitter, although I'm back on it. I took a month off with the lockdown, but I'm at FPL Fantasy Guide.
Cool. So if you like what you hear or what you're watching, please rate, like, subscribe, retweet. It all helps us get the word out and make sure you don't miss anything. All the links to Andy's videos are in the description below. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you will find everything you ever need for fantasy football all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, the OptiStats that Andy has just mentioned, top player team reveals, and much more. If you fancy a free 7-day Hub membership trial, just go onto the website and sign up. The link again is below in the description. We will be back soon chatting with another fantasy football veteran. Until then, thank you and goodbye.